Here we go. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Great. So yeah, today I know everyone's traveling and things, and it's a busy summer. So there was no planned agenda today. We were going to sort of talk about our next steps. So that's what we're going to do a little bit. And if anyone joins, but if not, it'll just be me and Dr. Kim Solez, Kim and I, and and you can view it later. I realized that the interesting thing about Zoom is that, and that cut into Dr. Kane's talk, is that this little window gets recorded too. So let me see if this will work better this time, because it blocked off some of her PowerPoint slides, which is unfortunate. So anyway, thanks to everyone for their participation. And we've been grateful for the ideas of everyone. Recent meetings have included Pinaki Sardar on his exciting work. And he's actually interested in, I think, I'd like to hear from him, but I think he and also I heard from Dr. Tomaszewski this morning. He couldn't join, but he said that they're putting on a new server there, I believe at Buffalo, and it's going to be large, and they're actually interested and have some interest in being a pilot site too. We heard from Dr. Kane on the big picture, and her talk was excellent. And I think that's something we're shooting for here with Banff. And then June Kong presented last week on his pilot server. I think that's a nice first step. I have a few slides that I'll go over quickly to refresh everyone's memory on that. I think it's our first pilot, but we're going to have others. We also heard from Dr. Levinson on novel microscopy, and that was outstanding, and definitely in the future, I think the Banff needs to be involved in that type of thing. So obviously this is from our paper. I'm not going to rehash this. You can look at the paper, and I realize in retrospect, this was very complex, and I've tried to, thin it down, and I'm not going to read all this. You can pause the video if you want to, but I'm trying to pare it down more and more. And it's getting smaller and smaller, but it's coming down to the top things that we've wanted to do. And I'm moving those to the top, is that the image bank for the algorithms, and then the algorithm validation, which three of our goals kind of fit into, as big things. The other things are even have some overlap with other Banff working groups, like the standardization of practices and things like that. So we can obviously be involved in those things, and molecular, we can obviously be involved in those things in the future. But I think our top things are the image bank and the algorithm validation. So we definitely want to, focus on those things. And you can read this more and pause the video if you want, if you read it. And as Dr. Barasoni said, there are things that we must have, should have, and wish that we had. We want to do an image bank and platform to share algorithms, and eventually a competition even. And June Kong presented his pilot last week. Here are a few screenshots from that. You can sign up if you want to. And I think he's got this open to anyone who wants to try it now. And there are projects that you can view, and the analysis that you can view also, and see how to do that. As he mentioned, there's some things that they're still working through, some kinks, and actually he invites some feedback to improve this. And I've actually uploaded some images, some of heart biopsies, are actually from rat hearts from a project, and then some non-human primate, both biopsies and nephrectomies. So there's tons of tissue there, and they actually have a lot of rejection. I have 65 images in there so far, and most of these are from Dr. Stuart Connectley and Jean Kwon at Duke University. They've been long-term collaborators of me, and even though they're non-human primate, I did that because there's not as much, there's no PHI with those. So we don't have to worry about that right now, the security issues as much. But it also, I think this is one area that, there are not many people working on non-human primate transplant, pathology, but I think we need to work on that because, Banff directly applies to that. And, the rejection scoring pretty much applies, although, when you think about a nephrectomy, that's something that we need to talk about in the future is, how do you score these? non-human primates. There is a C4D immunohistochemistry slide, which was stained by my lab, but it was a TMA provided by Jake Demetris. And then there's some liver steatosis slides, which actually June has several algorithms that he and I have worked on. So you basically upload images to the each project, and I can share. We can share the images with other people. If you join, you won't see the projects initially, but if you ask, I can share the project with you. And I encourage, like you say, right now we're trying to stay away from HIPAA images. I don't know what the equivalent of that is in Canada, but basically in Europe, I know the GDPR or whatever. So we're trying to stay away from, try to only do de-identified data, and we'll work through these issues more, and we can talk about that. There is a wiki of the thing that you can read about and view some videos of how to use the software, and it's an open source software. June has kept it open source. He's not trying to commercialize it. So it's on GitHub. So you can actually, all the source code and everything is up there. So you can view that. And this is an example of one of the kidney transplant images with arteritis that I uploaded. So, and there are others examples. I want to encourage and remind everyone about the Slack. I think, it's not a perfect communication tool. We might want to talk about what's working and what's not, and maybe there are ways to organize it better. I was running out of space to store the videos, so I've started putting them on. I have a lot of space on like Azure Cloud or whatever, Microsoft, but some people who don't use Exchange, I think, had trouble viewing those. Some people told me they could. So but I put some videos on, like I have Google also, but I don't have as much space, but I can put, by request, I can put things on Google. So future possibilities, and in future weeks, we're going to continue to have dedicated speakers. So I think, Peter Boer's on vacation, but he's the next pilot I think that we're going to have. So like, he has some space. He talked about that in one of our first meetings, but basically in general overarching sort of brush strokes. And so he's going to hopefully have that and maybe make it open just like June did. And I think the great thing about that is it's going to be good for people in Europe too, more than the one over here. I mean, the accessibility I think is the same, but who knows? And plus his is going to, when we do have sort of more data that has more metadata attached to it, I think the European cases are going to be more easily uploaded to one that's in Europe. And the pilot server possibly also from Pinaki Sardar. Several people in his group have mentioned to me that they're, after the presentation last week, they're very interested in doing this. So we're going to look into that. I wanted to touch base with Helen Liapis, because I was part of that paper that she did on, the donor biopsies that was published by Banff as a project of Banff. She had we all scored images in that group, in that sort of project. And so, we basically, I touched base with her, and, she's semi-retired, I think now, but she's in, moving all over Europe, and she's all over the place, but she's definitely still in close contact with Joe Gaunt. And so she put me in touch with him. And so he and I are going to have a meeting later this summer. He must be really busy, but he and I are going to have a meeting, and we're going to see if there are any of those images still available. She thinks there are some still available at Washington University. And obviously we want to keep our, contact with Dr. Kane and the big picture open. And we want to expand our pilot server with June Kong and, add algorithms and things like that. So, basically I wanted to just have this as a brainstorming time. I have a little whiteboard that we can write some notes. And so I've just figured out how to share that. And so we can talk about that and talk about useful things that we've done, how we're going to disseminate this in the future, basically with another paper to include the survey and also the pilot. A couple, hopefully we'll wait to have, I think, a couple pilots, which we talked about that last week. We don't want it to be exclusive to any one group. So hopefully Peter Bohr will be our other pilot, and then maybe additional features. And so actually that brings me to, I think I'll share this with my cable now, and you and I can talk about what we want to do next. Is that showing up for you? Yeah,
Yes.
I can take notes, and you and I thought that might be the good thing, is you and I could take notes, and if people want to view this in the future, they can. So
for people who haven't been part of these discussions before, this is the best, concise summary of them that there's ever been. And so I think it should go on YouTube. Perhaps you can do that, or I can do that, because that's the easiest place to access. Okay. And it's going to be a smaller file size because it's not as long as your other videos. So I would certainly like to see it there. Mm-hmm. And our residents here will be one of the groups looking at it, I think, because they're potentially interested in doing research related to the projects that you mentioned. And so that's nice. We're guaranteed that we'll have young people involved and new people who haven't been taking part before. I would point out that the idea of a competition is very important in my life, because you may know a lot of the things I'm pitching now are based on the 2020 protein folding competition, which DeepMind conclusively won with their entity AlphaFold. And the thing that's important about that, just simply conceptually, is protein folding is more complicated than any of the problems we're presently working on. It's more complicated than climate emergency, nuclear war. All the big problems of the human race are simpler than protein folding. So the fact that AI has solved protein folding means that, at least in theory, with human cooperation and something to measure, something to count, that all these things are potentially solvable, that challenges that seem maybe overwhelming to humans are not overwhelming to AI. And they've already succeeded. Like, if you or I were to try to conceptualize how proteins fold, it's impossible for the human brain to sort of figure that out. But computers have already solved it. So it's just showing. So conceptually, for us to talk about a competition is very good. It makes us look like we really know what's going on in the world, because, see, computing scientists have sort of thought from the AlphaFold success that every other thing they try has to have every 2-year competition like that. But all the problems associated with human suffering, like systemic racism, colonialism, all those things don't have a competition every 2 years, but they have lots of things that you can measure, right? And there's some willingness for human cooperation. So they are things that AI can also focus on and help to fix. So that's a kind of bigger picture in which we are operating. So
Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, I've thought about YouTube actually, yeah, what I should do is put it also probably on Twitter and Facebook, even though I'm not big into that, but I can do that. I'll probably
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I can, but I think it's mainly your work, so it's, you know, appropriate that you do it if you can.
yeah,
But I think this particular video is shorter than any of our others and more broadly appealing, and sort of gets to the meat of what exactly we are, who we are, what we're doing, and so on, more quickly than any of the other videos. So I think it's better promotion for the working group. So it makes it worthwhile that you and I got together while everybody else is having fun on holiday. But you know, it was valuable for us to do this. So yeah.
yeah, and I'll definitely open it up with that. You know, posting that, we'll open it up to other people. You know, and
Sure.
you know, other groups. I'm sure there are other groups working on this thing. We basically have no involvement from Asia, obviously Africa, and so you know we have Europe and America, but you know, or South, and we don't have South America even. So you know, we want to make it international, and so yeah, who knows? This could get even bigger. So
Yeah.
you know,
And if you think about the other big project that I'm a part of, with the Renal Path Society, my fundraising is specifically to allow free immunohistology in resource limited countries. So a lot of the people who are not taking part in the work of this working group live in those countries, would find this interesting. And I have a list now of all those people practicing renal pathology in resource limited countries. We're doing a survey specifically of them to see how much immunofluorescence and immunoperoxidase they are doing on kidney biopsies, what vendors, what sera, so on, all that stuff. That survey is going out in the next week, probably. So, and it sort of nicely brings in all the people that we're not currently in contact with. You know, the lots of addresses and very challenging parts of the world to live. You know, Central Africa and so on. Yeah. So.
great. Yeah. Well, yeah, and we can use this as our welcome to other groups, and you know, definitely you know, try to get other people involved from those countries too. And you know, some of the technologies that we talk about definitely touch on providing, you know, if the staining was done in, you know, America or some other central place, it could be made available to anybody in the world. So
Sure.
yeah, and
Yeah.
the analysis
And
too.
even the virtual background that I'm using, you know, is kind of conceptually interesting to think about. Where does the truth lie? Like that, this is supposedly a picture of a stem cell, but it's the creation of a very talented graphic artist, right? Who's probably not a scientist, but knows a little bit about stem cells, but he's better at colors and drawing. And, you know, this looks good enough to eat, right? You don't know quite what it is, but it's a very appealing image. And so even that, thinking of how to promote things, what are the limits of who we're trying to reach, you know, that is all. Like when you look at that silvery reflection on the cell's surface, computing scientists the other day were asking me if cells really have that. I would say, I don't think in most ways that we look at them that they do have that bright, shiny surface, but who knows, you know? I thought it was a very good question. how true to life are these vivid colors? Does nature ever have, at the microscopic level, colors as vivid as this? And the computing scientists said they thought not, because when they have delved into sort of biology and medicine, it's always less exciting than the conceptual pictures, right? Conceptual pictures have very bright colors, and when you get to the real thing, it's sort of drab. But yeah, even that's sort of interesting to think of how realistic should our virtual backgrounds be? Am I doing something questionable by having such a very colorful background of a stem cell, maybe with more color than any real stem cell ever has, right? So yeah.
Well, yeah, colors definitely insects see differently and things like that. So
Yeah.
insects and yeah, dogs and cats. I mean, so
Yeah, I mean, we have an idea of a world, which is what we see, but the world is much richer than that, because we don't see a whole bunch of important frequencies, right? So
that's true. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, I think let's wait until 10:30, and
Sure.
that way, if anyone. But I think this is a great plan. I think I'll put this up in several places, and we'll plan to have it in 2 weeks. Actually, I'll make the agenda more explicit for the next week. I don't think Peter can do it next week, but hopefully by the end of August, he can do it. The next meeting will be in August. So we'll use the next meeting. I'll be explicit about that will be our next planning session.
Right.
And we'll probably have newer people. If we put this up and, I get, open it up to more people, then we might get more input at that time. And, I can have a very short introduction next time, and then we can just have an open floor next time, sort of like I was going to plan to do here, and have some I can have it more guided. I have some sort of, what I can do is have PowerPoint and I can have a few slides that are blank. I like to leave it, I was going to leave it blank like this so that people could provide sort of their next steps. I think our next thing should be sort of, I want to come up with a diagram of what this working group needs to do, more than just the blocks of the different goals, but it's sort of like a organizational diagram or some sort of thing to think about
hierarchy and direction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah, and there's one other thing to point out, which people who don't know much about Banff may not realize, that Banff has no members. Like, somebody may say, well, I'm not a member of Banff, can I take part in the group? There is no such thing as being a member of Banff. Anybody interested in the work of the Banff Foundation, the Banff transplant pathology meetings, so on, can be a part of it. There isn't sort of a barrier to entry, and so that makes it a little bit easier when people wondering whether they belong here, whether they're here illegally, whether they wet back their way in and they're not supposed to be here. We're not engaged in sort of ethnic cleansing of trying to make sure only pure Banff people are here. There is no such thing as that. So yeah,
that's a good point. I think and I've heard you try to make that clear before, especially at some of the Banff meetings before, in the program. It said something like, it's open to a lot of people, and they're, and it's been clear that it's not always the regulars. Sometimes you'll have new people you never see before. And
and the most exciting part of the face-to-face meetings used to be the young person who had never been there before speaking up and saying something that changed our whole thoughts about that area, and that happened regularly over and over again. And the same thing happens in the course that I teach, technology and the future of medicine. The first time I taught that, we had a lecture and then discussion. And in the discussion, I always had the brightest comments. And I thought, oh, this is so terrible. It's just Kim and Kim and Kim. But the next semester, there were suddenly students with better comments than I had previously had. And that is sort of, continued. So it's that intellectual ferment with a lot of young people that, makes meetings really exciting. So, I think we can have that here.
My handwriting's not, I didn't mean to do that, but anyway, yeah. Yeah, so, but I think people get the point, the digital pathology working group. Yeah, well, I guess we'll go ahead and end it. I'll take a little bit of extra time to make sure this one is right before I put it up. And then in 2 weeks, I think we'll have a more, guided planning session. Hopefully more people will be there then, and we may have some new people. Yeah, so we'll have a good weekend, and until I see you again, time in summer. I hope things cool. Or is it hot there?
Yeah, it has sometimes been so hot that people who don't have air conditioning have a hard time sleeping. We're far enough north that's not a usual problem, but in recent weeks it has been. But it hasn't been that way in recent days. So.
Well, that's good. Yeah. Well, again, yeah, thank you all so much. And if anyone's watching this later, we thank you for watching this and welcome you to be a part of this. And hope everyone is well. And I think we'll go ahead and end it here, and hopefully people will watch this. Yeah. Well, thank you. Great. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Take care. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.